Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. I'm sitting in the Tony Awards suite at the Sofitel NYC, which is the official hotel of the 2019 Tony Awards. And I'm sitting with the masterminds behind the hilarious new musical Tootsie, director Scott Ellis, book writer Robert Horn, and composer-lyricist David Yazbek. This is such a glorious musical. It is such a feel-good musical where you just go to the theater and have the time of your life, laugh, and have a wonderful time.
Which show is this we're talking about?
Tootsie. Let's talk about just collaborating. I mean, as I'm sitting here watching the three of you, you're like the Three Stooges, and I mean that in the best way.
So let me just say this.
Yeah.
What you're seeing here,
Yeah.
this is 3 years of this.
3.5.
3.5 years. We have done nothing but laugh. We
Yeah.
do. Even when it was not great, we still laughed. We just that's all we did. And that there's always one person of the three that would roll their eyes. That would be me. And there was always be someone who would cross the line.
Yeah.
That would be this one, and one in the middle here. So, so the truth is, what you're seeing is exactly what we've been experiencing for 3.5 years, which hopefully is part of what you see on the stage.
Yeah. It's a perfect collaboration. Tell me what it's been like with all series just of working together. Anybody take it?
I mean, I came on. And they can talk about it. I came
Yeah.
on board. I was the last person on board with these two, and I've said this before, but I went and said I had a breakfast with them, and I walked away, and I said these two really seem like they'd be fun to work with, and that's really how it started. I didn't know Robert at all. I knew Yazbek, and yes.
Are we still talking about Tootsie?
And this is what I'm talking about. This is it. So.
There's always
So
one.
this is always one. So that's really how it was. I think all three of us after that meeting felt like, okay, I think this would be. Listen, new musicals, they're really hard. They're really hard. So you better do it with a group of people that you really like and respect and feel like that you can have a good time with. And that's how it felt from day one. Really from day one.
Robert, for you.
Well, David and I met. Scott Sanders, our producer, and Carol Feinerman called and asked if I would meet with David. And I think both of David and I were a little nervous about the title when we were first approached by it. Scott hadn't joined us yet, but David and I met, and truly it was kismet. The minute we met, we initially.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I thought we were talking about Tootsie.
And then,
that was a funny
I'm going to
joke,
try to
'cause
be
Kismet
serious
is also
here. I know
a
it's a
musical.
musical. It was more than Kismet. It was
Stepped on my punchline.
Carousel. And then, I think initially we talked a lot about what we knew we didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And that led to what we do want to do. But really, our humor just. From the minute we got together, it was like we knew where the humor of the show would live because it very much was our humor. And then we worked, and when Scott came in, David and I took about a year to just talk about what the show was going to be. And then when Scott came in, we had to throw all of that out because then Scott came in, and then it took it to the next place, and we started really looking at it. A lot of what we had done, Scott agreed with, and a lot of it he didn't, and then then it became a trio, and that's sort of the show that you see now really started at that point.
There were very few times that we ever sort of. It wasn't like arguing. It wasn't arguing. It was something we would disagree with things, but I think that's what good collaboration is. And it's please, my list at home. It would be back and forth, and we'd try this. But I do think we all said, we were always saying, well, let's just try it. Let's just see. We don't know for 100%, but we can try it. And I think that gave us all the freedom to sort of say, okay, here we go.
No, and inevitably the audience tells you, it's a comedy. You're either getting laughs, you're either getting the right kind of, rapt attention, or you're not. And that's the ultimate. You try to get everything as good as you can, and then see what they tell you.
The joy for me also was, and I'll talk about both of the gentlemen on either side of me, is with David. Many of our work sessions would start with David saying this. I know we can't do this, but, and usually we would always do it. And with Scott, his mantra was always, let's try it. Let's try it. So I was working with two collaborators that where anything was game and where there were nothing bad was on the table. The bad was on the table. It didn't make, but initially the willingness to try anything, and because we really had to explore the show and the subject matter and the story in new ways, and we knew we could not lock ourselves to anything that existed beforehand. In fact, the opposite, which is we all knew that we needed to do our show and then bring back into it what may or may not work. And so for me, I'll talk for me that to have a collaboration where you are so free to bring up, to try anything or do anything, and have these incredible collaborators that not only will agree to that, but take it to a level that you didn't even anticipate when the idea was on the table. So that was pretty great, and I think that really is probably the core of any good comedy is risk, and the risk has to start at that stage of it.
Did a lot of things work? Yes, a lot of things did work. Did a lot of things fail? Yes, a lot of things did fail. And for comedy, you have to be willing to do that. And actually, we all felt safe enough in a room to say, let's look at it and try it. And there were many times in previews, and we were like, oh God, we got to get that thing out of there. That doesn't work. But there were many times that it worked. And I will say, for every single reading that we did, and we did a lot of them, and that's thanks to Carol and Scott, we would go in there and we always felt we took a couple steps forward. We rarely went way backwards. By taking steps forward, where there were other things that were like, okay, well, this doesn't work now. But there was a very nice momentum for us. And sometimes it would be 5 steps, just one, but there would be movement forward. And we always went, okay, we have a lot to do, but we did feel, and I think that was a really great positive thing for us to keep moving. We knew that we were moving forward with it on a good plan.
Yeah. David, we talked before we got started here about tone. The tone of Tootsie, everything about your musical is perfect. And it all starts with the tone. You said you worked on that for a long time,
Robert
right?
and I Robert and I got together, and I'm gonna drop a name from several years ago. I had a lunch with Mike Nichols, and I asked him, what do you think is the first thing to deal with? And he said, not surprisingly, tone. And that's proven out over and over again. So in sitting down to adapt sort of an iconic show like this, but really in sitting down with any collaborators to do any kind of show, you really have to feel like you're in the same space in terms of tone. Yeah. And that's why that was so important. For me as a composer and a lyricist, it's ultra important. We can figure out what the comic tone of it is. But, it's sort of hard to intellectually figure out what the musical tone of something is. It's one thing if it's set in a certain country or something, but so those discussions are absolutely vital. And then when it's time to say, okay, we've got something here, someone like Scott Ellis, who's basically a professional tone meister, comes in, we can say, here's what we think, what do you think? And hopefully we'll all be on the same page and we'll come up with something cohesive. And when you say perfect, that's a word I don't like to use, but except about my buttocks, which I think are shaped perfectly and move very nicely. But when you say perfect, I would say cohesive. I mean, like that's what you want in a show that feels like, oh, everybody worked on this together. That includes a cast that kind of just, I think another job of the director is imparting the tone to this large group of people. It's not just the cast. It's also the designers. It's also the people who just work backstage and do your hair and understanding what the tone is. And I think everybody, except there's that one guy, Marvin. I don't trust Marvin. I never trusted him. But everybody else understands the tone of the show, and every night comes together under that umbrella of tone.
And I remember I was talking to Marvin, and he...
There's no Marvin.
There's no Marvin, everyone.
Go. No, I was going to say, and you might be coming up with this question, but David just mentioned, the cast. I mean, that's a phenomenal group of actors and people who are inherently funny and understand comedy. And we were so fortunate because we were able to work with them and sort of hone in and bring the strengths out of what we had, and we were able to truly collaborate with them. And you have two people who are incredible about that and who understand you're going to only be as good as the person who you're working with. And so let's get to their strengths and let them guide us a little bit. And it was a very long journey of listening to it and actors. But once we got those actors that we all agreed with, that opened up another whole chapter for us. And I think we were all surprised how far it took us to the next step with that, I think.
Yeah, but I got to hand that to you, like 90%, because that's another thing a director does, is comes in with this sort of feeling of people you've seen before, or in your head, people like other people. And then, because Scott came in, and we started casting, and he really clearly had ideas about these people, which proved to be pretty spot on. Especially people like Santino, this guy comes in and he's absolutely perfect in every way for this part. That Scott Ellis came in with that concept and also pushed that concept hard at the beginning.
And to add to that, Scott, I don't know how, I won't speak for all directors, but there was an early mandate with Scott to David and I, which is talk to the actors. Normally, you sort of know your lane and everything goes through the director. And it did with Scott, but Scott would always say, I'd ask him something, he said, go talk to Lily, go talk to Sarah, go talk to Julie, talk to Santino. He wanted us to have a relationship, an open relationship where any conversation was possible with the actors. And we really did build these characters in the show on these actors and listen to their input. I always say we can give birth to something, but they bring it to life. And
you can't do that all the time. Like, you can always talk to actors, but you got to have smart people who understand comedy, and that was the key. I feel like, and we discussed this too. I remember when we were casting, we were saying, like, even every ensemble player, every understudy, every swing has to understand how smart comedy works, because otherwise it's just a battle to get them into
I think you can shape comedy a little bit. I do. I think, and we do, the three of us do. But man, if you don't have people who truly understand that, you can't teach that. There has to be something DNA understanding of comedy, and it, as we always say, comedy is hard, and it has to be truthful and real. And if you have that to begin, then you can shape a little bit. But if you don't have that, I think you're dead in the water. And these people had it.
And let me just add one thing, because what Scott said is important, which is we knew that the language of the show was going to be comedy from the beginning. But we also knew that the comedy, no matter how funny it was, lyrically or in book or in staging, none of that would matter if you didn't take care about the characters, were not invested in the story, if the stakes were not high, and if there wasn't pathos. So much has to be at risk all the time. Great comedy is grounded in truth, and that was something that we all from the beginning knew. We could go as broad as we wanted, we could go as big as we wanted with the humor, as long as it kept, as it was grounded and came from character and story. And that was a big part of this journey.
People always say when they walk out of the show, "Oh, that was the funniest show I've seen in years, and that was great." And they talk about the jokes, and that's great. And it is funny. It is, but all of that comes from a sense of reality. Robert can write some funny jokes. And we've had discussions as far as, you don't need that joke. I know it's funny, but you don't need it. But what makes it really work is that it's always character driven. He's not writing just a joke for the sake of a joke. It's a joke that's working because of the character. Same with David's stuff. It's not just funny, great lyrics. It's lyrics that are funny because it's connected with this particular character.
And I would say that also the thing that not everyone gets is, and really, to me, the key of intelligent comedy is the line between comedy and drama. It's so fine. And a friend of mine who worked at Second City was telling me about this exercise they used to do called comedy drama. and you would just be acting as though you were in a comedy, and then someone would yell out drama, and then you had to act it like you were in a drama, and the difference is just razor thin. I found that very interesting. That must be a great way to learn about what comedy is.
Who was the last character you worked on in this? Because this movie is an older movie from 37 years ago. How you updated this is absolutely brilliant, and you set that from the very, very beginning.
Go ahead. Well, we all said the same thing immediately.
It was the character of Julie. It was that character that we.
And that's the last song I wrote.
And that's the last song. That was our trickiest. That was the trickiest thing to find. They were all. You would think that Michael Dorothy would be, and it was certainly had its challenges, but it was not. It was Julie because. Listen, we agreed as the three of us that we had no interest in putting the movie on the stage. And by the way, when I got it, they had not done that. It wasn't like I said, "Oh my God, throw it out." Yeah. It was just we veered more into character-driven stuff and caring about those characters. And then we believed if you did care about their journey, you wouldn't even be thinking of the movie, which I think we did. But the character of Julie was the trickiest because in the film, it's really not a character. She drinks a little bit. She was stunningly beautiful, and the camera did a lot of work. I'm not taking anything away from what she did, but we had to find something active, strong, and believable within this story that we were telling. And that, I think, that was our biggest challenge, and that's the thing we worked for solid 3 years on that.
Yeah.
3 years.
And a lot of that came together when Lily Cooper came in and auditioned because
100%.
she showed us.
Yes.
We knew we wanted this character to have a core strength, and we knew that we wanted that character to be a mirror of Michael in many ways, and that. He had to fall in love with her, and the audience had to fall in love with her, so they understood why he fell in love with her and was willing to sacrifice and ultimately give up everything he thought he wanted for something he never expected. So she's got a lot of heavy lifting to do in this show, which is she has to be strong, she has to be vulnerable, she has to be funny, and we have to fall in love with her. And we knew we had to bring all those elements together, and I will say, and we've talked about this before, one of the things that was important about this character is in the movie that the character of Julie found her empowerment through Michael dressed as Dorothy. We knew from the beginning, and we all three had a big discussion about this, that we knew we needed Michael to find his story through spending this time with a strong woman. That his lessons and his everything that he learns in this had to come from his experience of being with her and not the other way around. So then it was about how do you find an actress that can give you all those things? And Lily came in. She was halfway through singing the song that David wrote, and we all looked at each other, and it was done. It was done. And she brings a tremendous vulnerability and strength to that role.
Yeah. Oh,
No.
well, I was just going to say the word we kept looking for when we couldn't find the actor for that part, the word that kept coming up was gravitas. Now, it's a weird word for a comedy, but it's kind of like, no, there's got to be the sense that this character is planted on the earth. And that's what Lily comes in with. She's a young person with a confidence, you know. Scott just said an old soul. I mean, she comes off as someone with a lot going on internally, and that's what I was looking for. I mean,
and this goes back to what we talked about before. There were two characters, Lily being one, but everybody else in the show was cast at a reading. So we never actually had auditions. We would have a reading, and Scott, along with Jim Carnahan, our casting director, Scott would say, I worked with somebody. Let me just bring them in. I think they might be good. He never said, this is the person, this is... Yeah. And he was always right. And everybody was cast. And when we found Lily, she fit so perfectly into this family... you get the feeling when you watch this cast that it's like watching the Carol Burnett show in its heyday. It is these clowns, these brilliant clowns that work so well together. When you have Reg Rogers and Julie Halston and Michael McGraw and Santino Fontana and Sarah Stiles and Andy Grodelushin, and there was one missing element, and then Lily came in and fit that family perfectly.
And then I love what you did with the John Bellman character.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of based on the George Gaines character from the movie. And I said, what a brilliant way to bring this forward.
Yeah.
That was smart.
right?
That was this guy.
Well,
Really? Yeah.
well, it came from conversations we had, which was we had made this decision that that character would have easily been a trope, and we did not want that to be. But there was an interesting dynamic at play that we wanted to have, which is to create a character who sees his self-worth basically through the vanity that life has presented to him, that his aesthetic is really what he is worth. At the same time, you've got Michael impersonating, creating this character as being the consummate actor he is, not realizing that when he puts on that dress and the heels, he is going to be judged by a very different aesthetic by the world than he ever imagined as a man. So the reason this young, good-looking guy, who you would think would fall for the young, good-looking girl, falls for the woman that isn't a traditional beauty is because she brings to him something he never had, which is the idea that he's worth more than what the world has told him.
I just my favorite line that you've written for him, and there's a lot of funny ones, is when I was a kid, I never fit in except with the popular kids. You know, everyone has their hole in their soul. You know, that sums him up, I think.
So that's sort of where that character came from, and we knew that we wanted to give that character in the movie, and he was fantastic in the movie, but the character lived in just one dimension, and we knew we needed that all the characters in this piece had to have fuller arcs than one might have been in the original concept of the movie.
Yeah. Santino Fontana. I mean, your whole cast absolutely brilliant. Was that tough to do you have conversations with Santino about taking this role?
I had been lucky enough because I knew who he was. He had asked me to go up to New York Stage and film the summer before I got involved, and he was rewriting a musical, Roar of the Grease Paint, and I went up and spent 2 weeks with him up there, and I fell in love with him. I just thought, here's a really smart actor who will challenge me and anybody else who has ideas, and ultimately he's just a great actor with a phenomenal voice, mind you. But I never thought of him that way. I just thought, so it was an instinct of just, I felt unbelievably strong about it. So I told the guys at the very beginning, and I told Scott, I said, listen, if you want to name, i.e. a movie star, TV, I just said I'm not interested. I just said it's too tricky to try to make this work, and we knew we had work. And I literally said I'll only do it for this guy, and it proved right, because I knew he was going to be able to find that line, what David said beautifully, of that comedy and drama, and both of them. But also he would be able to make Dorothy real. And for me, Dorothy, you had to fall in love with Dorothy. You had to understand Dorothy. Yazbek has said this many times. There is a leading lady up there, and it's Dorothy. You know, and but you had to believe that. And my gut was that was him. And by the way, we don't give him credit enough, I don't think, because when we look back, he always asked questions. He always challenged us. He was always saying, this is not right, or can we do this? I mean, he really, I think he really challenged us in such great ways for us to keep going back and asking the questions and making sure it was clear. So,
because your cast is the best of the best. Everybody's on the same page, just giving it 1,000,000%.
They're a great group.
Yeah.
And as I said, I was lucky that I worked with a lot of them, or I saw someone but also, we went in as a collaborative team, and then they all came in with such a great place, but then we were able to move it forward because we were open enough to collaborate with them. It's really what it was. We collaborated with them, and that was really important. We never shut the door on anybody.
Yeah, but you don't, you don't not collaborate with people who are coughing up such funny stuff. You know, we're writing for them, we're directing them, but there they are during rehearsals having a great time, and those are gifts that keep coming, you know, whether it's a gift of an actual physical joke, or whether it's the gift of us being able to watch them and say, oh, I have an idea for him or her. Right. You know.
I watched. There's a lyric in the show. I think the funniest anything in the show is a line that John Bellman sings. And I remember he had another line, and it kind of wasn't. It was fine. It was okay. And David was sitting there watching, and he said, "This was literally, wait a minute." Scratched down on a piece of paper, handed it to John Bellman. He did it. It was what got one of the biggest laughs in rehearsal, and to this day gets one of the biggest laughs in the show. I won't give it away what it is, but it'll be very clear.
I think I know what it is now, yeah.
But that's what's great about great collaboration. You can sit somewhere and hear something and say, no, we're going to change this. And you make it better.
It would be ridiculous if we shut our ears and didn't.
But you know the people who do.
Yes, and there are people who do.
Yeah.
And that was not our room. That was just not our room. It was a constant listening and changing and trying. And I always say with actors, and I've said it many times, I love actors, but you have to take an environment in a rehearsal room, that it's joyful. I don't care if you're doing the hardest drama ever. You still got to be joyful. And you've got to be able to feel safe to fail. You have to.
Yeah.
Actors have to feel like they can try anything and not feel judged. And we as collaborators have to feel safe to be able to also do that. And no, not everything is going to work. But if you can create that atmosphere in a room, then things can move forward and hopefully find something that works.
I love the score. I love all your scores, but this is such a character-driven.
You're very wise, Richie. That's why I love you.
No, but seriously, did you come up with the musical tone for everybody? I mean, all these different characters you wrote, they all have these beautiful, incredible character songs that tell their whole journey.
Well, I think the style, it's eclectic. It's an eclectic score. Hopefully you can tell it's one composer.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little of the Full Monty in terms of, I sort of let character, comedy, and story suggest what the genre or what the song should be. So sometimes, if you have someone like Sarah Stiles playing just a neurotic nutcase who's got way too much energy, it's pretty clear you're going to want a patter song.
Yeah.
And then everything just fell into place. It was like, oh, fast mambo. Why? I don't know. It's easy and it's stupid, And then she, over that kind of like, fun cha-cha thing, she is just singing about how her mind is exploding because she has to go on an audition. So that's how it came. The music kind of bubbled up through character, comedy, and story. And then sometimes you work into the lyrics from the music. Sometimes it's the other way around.
Besides the one character you were talking about, what was the easiest song for you to write? What came the quickest?
I think probably in a way that song. It wasn't easy to write, but it was quick. Once the music was in place and it just sounded right, then I can do my favorite kind of lyric writing, which is basically pacing around my studio and listening to the groove, and then just start sort of singing, and then soon, hopefully, there's a pattern that feels right, and there's certain places where repetition happens, and before you know it, you've got a song, and then you do what we do, which is we work the hell out of it until you feel like it's really perfect, which usually happens the day before or the day that you lock the show.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you could sum up finally the best part of the experience of working on Tootsie. I mean, I'm sitting with you three here, and I can see the love you have. You're like three brothers. You're like the Three Stooges. I mean, you can see the collaboration you had and the love in that room and everything else. If you could sum up the best part, what is it for each of you with working on Tootsie?
It's this interview, Richie. Right
Besides
now.
That, thank you.
No,
I mean, live in the moment. That's what you do.
I live in the moment. I forgot everything else that happened. I feel like, what's the next show? No. I mean, the best part of it is really like the peak moments for me aren't like, oh, we opened, or oh, look who's in the audience. The peak moment is we're sitting at a table and someone says something really funny, whether it's either one of these guys or me or whatever. Like, those are the nice moments. It's like, oh, here are some people I really like hanging out with. And then every time that happens, it just makes you think like, oh my God, I'm so lucky because I'm making a living working with these people. Your turn.
Swag. It's a no.
Well, this is a big deal for you. This is your Broadway debut. I mean, I run into this man.
It's not. It's my second.
All right. Well,
But
yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
I'll say, but it is my first real one. Hold on.
Your
one
Broadway
second. Hold on
rebirth.
1 second. No, it sort of it is that, and it is what David said.
Yeah.
It is. Because I sort of, as David has, as both these gentlemen do, live between the two worlds of Hollywood and theater, and there is a sense of community and collaboration in just by nature of the art form,
Yeah.
and that to me was the best part. Is that I say this, and I it is not a joke, that I've made brethren for life. I mean, the relationships. Because you spend so many, it's not just in television. Within 4 to 6 months, whatever you did, it's basically done. And there's this, it's that we still, the show's frozen, the show's over, and I speak to these guys 3 times a day.
Yeah.
There is such a love for the show, a love for each other, and the experience of creating art and creating comedy with people who support you, and that is a gift, and you take that. That's what you take with you most when you leave a production like this or an experience like this.
I mean, it's just a repeat of everything. Absolutely. And I think you also appreciate it the longer you're in the business, and you go, it doesn't always happen. And believe me, we disagree, but that's part of a good collaboration. We have arguments as far as what we feel and this thing, and that's great. But there's never any time you think, I don't want to be in a room with these two ever. That was all. It was just like, I'll fight for something. David will fight for something. Robert will fight for something. And those were the. So that's a really great, safe feeling to collaborate with, and that's what it is. I think we're really. I will say in Chicago, there's one moment, and I think it affected all 3 of us, and I think we talked about it so many times, which was if the show was going to work, we were all so focused on Dorothy, the first moment, Dorothy. That was the big thing. It was like, we won't have a show if you don't buy into that. And I remember 2 times. I remember the first time that he did that fast change in rehearsals, and he came out through the doors, and I think all of us were like, wow, this might work. I think this might work. This is good. And the first preview. And that to me was the best part, because that was a collaboration that all of us had been on for such a long time. And I remember sitting at the first preview before she came on for her audition, Dorothy, and watching her come in and going, are they going to buy it? Are they buy it? And I sat there and went, they just bought it.
Yeah.
And that was such a high, because I thought, we have a lot of work to do, but that part is taken care of. And that felt great, because that was a collaboration that we had from the beginning leading into that. And I think that was a really special moment, and it felt special speaking for myself, but I think it was special for all of us, because it was like, oh, we did that. Yeah. And now we can.
And I remember early on our early first meetings, and just sitting there, we sat there with the team, but and said, how are we going to do this? Yeah. How can we do this? How are we going to do? We're taking something that sort of is iconic, and we're not going to give them that, but we're going to give them that. It was so daunting, and we knew there were so many decisions to make, and we didn't know. And there is a certain level of relief, and it's gratifying, and without being cliche, but it is humbling in a sense to say, somehow we figured it out. And when the audiences, when there's an agreement from the audiences that you did that, there's pride. I think we all have a lot of pride in the show, except when you don't. But yes,
no, I don't even remember what show we're talking about. But no, I mean, there's that sense of pride is the sense of having worked hard, crafting something, and knowing that it really works. I feel like what we've done is something that, in my mind, is just so solid. It's just like, man, did we work on the masonry of it and putting the mortar down correctly and laying each brick, and very satisfying in the long term. And I hope, going back to see it in 6 months, I mean, I'll see it more than just in 6 months. I'll see it, every few weeks. But, as it goes on, wow, this is something solid that I'm going to be hearing, hopefully, from people who say, we did it in high school, and it was like so much fun. Yeah.
Because during the last few weeks, I love to walk through the Broadway district. And I love to stand in front of a theater when audiences are coming out. And I did it the other night at Tootsie. And I watched everybody, full house, pile out of that theater. You gave them so much joy.
Well, they say, thank you. And people say, we get asked this question all the time. It's like, what do you hope an audience leaves with? And the first thing I always say is, I hope they leave with $180 worth of merchandise, because that's the joke. But then I say the truth, which is, I want the audience to leave as though they've just been to the gym or been to the doctor. Like, I want them to leave feeling really healthy, because that's what I think is happening when you laugh really hard and genuinely, not that weird kind of laugh like I'm supposed to laugh. Then it clears everything out of your lungs and your blood has been pumping. That's the feeling that's why I started writing comedy, right out of college. It was like, that's what I was going for.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely not getting political, but we're not the best of times, or at least for me.
Yeah.
So when you get into a house with that many people and they just let go and say, we're going to forget about all that for a second and we're just going to go with this, that's a pretty great feeling. Yeah. That's a really great
And that's
feeling.
what your whole audience was
And
feeling,
that's what
walking
the whole
out of the
audience-
theater the
Yeah.
other night,
It's
humming
like-
and smiling
That's
and
right.
laughing and giggling, having had the best time at
Nothing
Tootsie.
better. Nothing better.
Well, I
than
thank
that.
all three of you for sitting with me today.
Hey,
All right.
Hey, Richie!
Richie!
Hey, what are we talking about? Some Broadway?